The chaos surrounding the government's Rwanda policy has been embarrassing to watch, but Johnny Mercer had a shot at defending it on BBC Question Time.
This is clearly an issue of debate in the Conservative Party, and nobody's running away from that at all. Obviously, the immigration minister resigned yesterday because he wanted to go further. He wanted to withdraw from European human rights law completely. And
he thinks he hasn't got a chance of getting through.
I'm sorry?
He thinks he hasn't got a chance of
succeeding.
That's fine,
and that's up to him. But the Prime Minister's dealing with lots of other narratives in this space as well, like Rwanda, who say, actually, if you leave that, this policy is going to fail. And there's no point even starting down this road. So it's all a balance. We all want more things in politics, and I've found that myself when I've been campaigning for veterans and veterans who've been prosecuted in Northern Ireland and things like that. I've always wanted more, but the art of it, actually, is being able to come together to unite around what is deliverable in the world as it is, not as we would want it to be, but as it is, and actually delivering something for hard-working, ordinary men and women up and down this country who see the unfairness of illegal migration.
So deporting a few hundred desperate people to Rwanda will re-establish fairness for ordinary Britons. I don't buy it, and neither did Guardian columnist and author George Monbiot.
Of all the hills to die on, this has got to be the most ridiculous. I mean, it's just absurd. The whole point of the Rwanda policy is not to try to solve anything. It's to performatively beat up some of the most vulnerable and traumatized people on earth in order to distract attention from the government's own failures. And Johnny says, this is giving the working people of this country something. The only thing this is giving the working people of this country is to show them that somebody else is worse off than they are, because that somebody is being performatively beaten up by the government. That's the point of the policy. And we have this ridiculous new bill, which is the first one I've ever seen, which tries to legislate the nature of reality. It says, we will legislate that Rwanda is a safe country. Regardless of whether Rwanda is or is not a safe country, we will put it in the law that it is a safe country. You might as well have a bill which legislates that the moon is made of green cheese. We have reached the point now, after 13 years of these fiascos, of total absurdity. They're not even intending to put this into implementation. They don't intend to make this a viable policy. They're just desperately throwing up clouds of dust in order to distract from the absolute catastrophe that this government has become for the great majority of the people of this country.
I agree with every word George Monbiot said there, and it's for this reason, right? The Rwanda plan is not going to work. And that's not just because it's being blocked by the courts. It's not just because it's pretty ridiculous to say, well, the court said Rwanda's not safe, so we're just going to make a new law which says Rwanda is safe. I think it's actually called the Safety of Rwanda Bill. You know, it's almost like a joke, as if he was saying, yeah, you call it the moon is made of cheese bill. You can't make something the truth by just saying it's the truth and then getting people to vote on that. But the reason I think it's just a distraction is because even if the courts allowed it, even if it got up and running, if you send a few hundred people to Rwanda, which has always been the numbers they've been talking about. It's never been the case that they've been saying, oh, well, if there's 50,000 people that cross the channel in a year, we'll send over 50,000 or 25,000 or 10,000. It's always been a very small number of people. And that will not work because people are already taking a very significant risk to cross the channel. Now, if they knew that that risk was not going to have, any positive outcome, it wasn't going to be possible for them to claim asylum in the UK, then maybe they wouldn't take that risk. But if they think, oh, there's a 2% chance that I might get deported to Rwanda, who is going to have taken all of the risks to get from the country they are escaping to get to Britain and then say, oh, all of those risks, potentially dying across the desert, potentially dying crossing the Mediterranean, but this 2% threat that I might be, or this 2% risk that I might be deported to Rwanda, that's going to stop me. It's just nonsense, right? And anyone who sort of engages their brain knows this, which is why I think George Monbiot is right. This is just a sort of, they wanted to create a fight, even though everyone knows this is going to have no effect on the reality. Let's watch a bit more of George Monbiot on this topic.
And that would be a point of mere amusement for comfortable people like ourselves sitting behind this table. But it has real consequences for real people. And among those people are people who have already suffered appalling things, unspeakable things, and just desperately want refuge, a safe haven. And what do they get instead? They get a government of sadists deliberately beating them up in order to show how tough they are.
Got a decent round of applause for that. Mike, do you agree? Do we have a government of sadists?
Absolutely. I think especially this version of the Conservative government are sadists. I mean, as you mentioned, the Rwanda plan will not work. And ultimately, the idea as a deterrent is not true because people aren't, taking these risky routes to this country because they're thrill seekers. They're doing so because they have to. There are literally no safe routes to the UK unless people travel across dinghies or hang on to the back of lorries. People are risking their lives because they see the UK as their only hope. So this is not about people doing this because, they're thrill seekers and, they just want to do it for the fun of it. They have no safe routes. So Britain has a moral duty to provide safe routes to those seeking refuge and asylum. That's what Britain needs to do. And that would help, stop some of the crossings that we see to Britain. These kind of, quote unquote, these stop the boat crossings. They would stop if we had, safe routes. So I think, ultimately, it's all just, for a show. It's all, Sunak wants to look like he's been tough on migration, and the Conservatives they've been tough on migration. But ultimately, this will not help things. This will not help stop the problem they want to stop, in inverted commas. I don't think they want to stop the problem. I think they want to be malicious. And I think this goes back years and years. I think several governments, not just Conservative governments, by the way, Labour governments, have formalised immigration policies that are just deeply malicious. I mean, the Blair governments did this, with some of their refugee policies and some of the rhetoric. I remember David Blunkett, some of his rhetoric was horrible around asylum seekers. So what's happened is the kind of liberal consensus on immigration has been one of hostility and just nasty policies. And I think the Conservative policies we're seeing in recent years and a discourse has been quite a disgusting manifestation of that. But I think this goes back years and years. I think actually both parties have, a lot of thinking to do when it comes to how they approach immigration, because when it comes to efficiency, when it comes to compassion, both parties are found wanting. And I think when it comes to the Conservative Party, they just take delight in being malicious at the moment. I mean, we saw Suella Braverman's comments, a couple of weeks ago about homelessness. These are people who take delight in being malicious. And it seems like they want to be malicious and they want to offend particular groups in society, often the most marginalized groups in society. So I think this is a malicious government. It's a government that takes delight in being malicious. And ultimately, it's a government that is fundamentally inefficient and will pay the price for that at the next general election.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how Labour deal with this if they do win the next general election, because they don't exactly have a sort of coherent proposal for what to do. The one thing that's sort of, I suppose a consolation is I think that the Tories have an active interest in making the migration system as more dysfunctional than it needs to be. And I think Labour probably will not want it to actively be dysfunctional, because the Tories think that increasing the salience of migration is good for them. Labour think increasing the salience of migration is bad for them. So I would imagine they don't want a system whereby there are tens of thousands of people spending months and months in hotels, because they don't want that row. That doesn't mean, though, that they won't sort of follow the lead of the tabloid press, as Tony Blair did, the Blair government, as you said. Basically, if they thought the right-wing tabloids were attacking them on the issue of asylum, they would create some new asylum law that made it harder to be an asylum seeker. So I think it was actually New Labour that banned asylum seekers from working while they were awaiting their claims, which is one of the reasons we had the problem now, which is that obviously people complain about, these people being put up by the state. Well, if you're not going to let them work, what else are they going to do, right? Nearly all asylum seekers who come to this country, they want to start working. They don't want to be put up in a hotel by the taxpayer. What they want to do is get a job. But because of New Labour, they aren't able to. And that was New Labour trying to shut down a critique from the tabloid press, which, guess what? Didn't work, right? They still attacked them.